excited to bring to you the second session of a journalist's perspective and insider view as a part of the International Colloquium on World Freedom of Press Day, organized by the Department of Visual Communication, Kumaraguru College of Liberal Arts and Science, Coimbatore. We just finished a fantastic session with Mr. Sam Daniel from NDTV. Today, we have for the second session Mr. Ramanathan, a well-known journalist who's a partner for content and strategy at the News Minute. The News Minute is a Indian digital news platform based in Bangalore, Karnataka, which was founded in 2014. Apart from Karnataka, it also has bureaus in the states of Telangana, Andhra Pradesh, Tamil Nadu, and Kerala. In Mr. Ram's career spanning over a decade, he has worked as a television news reporter and field reporter at various news desks across India's best television channels, including Times Now and NDTV Hindu. He was part of a team from the News Minute, which won the Lardli South Asia Award for its series Talking Gender. He was also awarded the Scarf Media Award for reporting on mental health 2018 for his reporting on mental health of the transgender community in India. So today, it's indeed our honor to have Mr. Ram with us to kickstart the second session of the International Colloquium on World Freedom of Press Day. Thank you so much, sir, for taking time out of your busy schedule and spending these precious moments to inspire the next generation of budding journalists in our country. Over to you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you for having me over. So, yeah, as I mentioned to Ananda, I'm going to go a little extempore here. I've not been able to prepare anything major for you guys. The topic and the reason why we're all here together on this session being freedom of press. I think there are essentially two main reasons as to why freedom of press is very important. One is information and the other is accountability. Right now, all of us are going through one of the biggest crises of independent India, right? And we've never seen anything like this, as the COVID crisis, the second wave especially. And one of the biggest things you can see as to why people are not able to save lives, why people are not able to save themselves is information, right? They don't know what to do, where to go, where to get help from. So one of the main and most important aspect of a free media is the fact that they are able to verify and put across, good information out there, which helps people. And when you don't have a free press, what you're essentially doing is controlling information. And, you've seen it in multiple cases under this government or the various other state governments, in the country today, that when you start controlling information, what essentially happens is that information then first reaches to the people who are in the upper social ladder or upper socioeconomic ladder, and people at the bottom of the ladder don't have the access to that information. So ultimately, that information asymmetry deepens the socioeconomic divide. And what a free media can do, and of course, there is a free media is by itself not necessarily a solution to information asymmetry. I think government communications and a lot of those things are very important, and we have a class divide in media as well. But what a free media at a foundational level will be able to do is try and disseminate that information as democratically as possible, as widely as possible, as across the socioeconomic ladders as possible. So that itself, the very fact that the government is doing something, or there is an availability of a particular kind of resource during any kind of a time, maybe during a time of crisis like this, people should know that, hey, this is happening and this is what I can do, or this is what I should be doing, right? So that is now at a very foundation level, without the context of the times that we're living through itself, is something which is a very important aspect of a free media. The second point, as I see it, like I mentioned, accountability, right? The freedom of press is infinitely more important when it comes to holding our governments, holding our leaders responsible. On that account, I think we can see as a nation we are collectively failing in a big manner. And as a person who belongs to the media ecosystem, I'm extremely ashamed of that. We're all at fault. I am at fault in many ways. I think I would like to think that we as an organization at the News Minute try and do our best to question the government out there, to question our political leaders. But still, I think we are definitely collectively failing. There are systemic issues, there are individual issues, all of those things. And the reason why that accountability is important is because, for obvious reasons, right? When you don't have anyone in power, anyone questioning people in power, then they just continue concentrating power, and then ultimately then they're answerable to no one. I think we can see that happening with the union government here today, that I at least it's my opinion that I don't think they think they're answerable to anyone at all, barring maybe who they think as their quote unquote vote bank, or their bunch of voters. And I think that accountability too is fast dwindling. So free media is like a watchdog, right? As a citizen, you and I only have so much time, so much bandwidth. We have to pay our bills, we have to do our job, we have to wash utensils at home and clean our homes, and it's not possible for us to sit day in and day out as citizens to think about what the government is doing, to keep a watch on them. So what a free media does is act as a watchdog, right? Keeping a close eye on people with power, and to try and hold them responsible when something goes wrong. I think as a media in India, we're definitely capable of that. I started my career during the peak of the 2G scam, and in the UPA era, I think as a nation, all of us came together to question them and ask them a few very hard questions, and I think they paid the price for that, and they're still paying the price for that. Why is it not happening today when the government goes wrong, right? That's the question we need to ask. And I think if you want to understand the importance of free speech today, all you need to do is look around what's happening right next to you, and then see if that's being reflected in the media out there. And when it's not, then we have a problem. And one other thing that I think we can notice is we can see how the credibility of a media as an ecosystem entirely has crumbled, right? And frankly, I think people are a little, I think people don't often, hold themselves as responsible as they should. I think as a citizenry also, especially the upper class citizenry in this country has failed massively. And media has becoming a favorite punching bag for everybody now, whether they are opposed to the government or whether they're with the government. Media is always the villain in this country now. But at the same time, what is happening is that credibility crisis which the media has, and to a large extent, the ecosystem it's its own fault. We deserve that kind of credibility crisis that we're facing. That has now turned into a thing where it's a free for all, right? So when the media's credibility is not there, nothing which even people who are questioning the media now are facing the same credibility crisis. So, and now what's happening as a result of that is that we have an ecosystem where it's just a narrative versus narrative, right? If I say that this is the truth, somebody's going to come back to me with a counter truth. So we are in really a dire situation as far as the free press is concerned. And I think the reasons for why we need a free press are pretty obvious and all around us.
I think very well put. We have a set of questions from our students of BSc Visual Communication. Let me first get Tirsa on screen. Tirsa. Tirsa, you can unmute and speak.
Yeah, hi Tirsa.
Okay, I think Tirsa is having some connectivity issue. We'll get Mitisha on screen right now.
Hello, sir.
Hi.
Sir, being a journalist in the media for a long time, how do you maintain the data with accuracy and with no bias at all in it?
Can I understand that question a little bit more? What do you mean by maintain the data?
So when you get certain data, like raw data certain times being as individual like us, we tend to get biased to a certain side. But how do you manage to, have the data as it is and not put your personal views into it and have it unbiased?
Okay, I'm guessing what you mean by data is information. I would take
Yes, sir, the information.
Yeah, okay.
Yes, sir.
So, see, you're right. We all have a biases, right? I have my biases. All of us have a biases. So, yes, one part of good journalistic training is to try and understand our biases, which are again evolving. So, it's not. It's a dynamic situation always. Our biases is always changing according to our lived experiences. So, an important part of journalistic training is to you set your bias apart, right? It's a skill, and it's also an attitude towards your work. And frankly, it's not a very difficult thing. It's a very subjective thing, but not very difficult, right? When you see the truth right in front of you, sometimes it needs to be wrapped in perspective. But you always know in your head whether you're going too far in wrapping the facts in perspective, and of course you know when you're lying. So how do you do it is, I think, journalistic training is required. I think at a very foundational level, when you are being taught journalism or when you're learning journalism, you need to know that, for instance, see how it comes down to very specific things, like how do you write a sentence. When you're given a piece of information, how do you write a sentence? You write a sentence without adjectives, without any vague adjectives. You say big, what is big? And you say small, what is small? So you come down to specifics, right? So Chennai 2015 rains was a big floods. They were big floods, but what is big flood, right? The failure of this government is big, but what is big failure? Bring it down to facts, bring it down to actual specifics, right? So I think when you start putting things down without adjectives to the specifics, with numbers, with specifics, that I think itself always gets a lot of the bias out of the situation. So I mean, you've used the term data instead of information. So with data, all you have to do is report the data, right? And not do anything else. But sometimes facts are more meaningful and helpful to people, to the citizens of a country, if it's along with the perspective, right? For instance, when we report on caste data in India, I think perspectives are very important, because the fact that one caste is above another in social capital is not something which we can always just report via facts, quote unquote facts. Sometimes perspectives are needed because there are lived experiences of people. The caste discrimination, for instance, happens in a very soft way, right? So I think sometimes that kind of perspectives are required, and those perspectives unfortunately can spin into bias a lot. And that's where I think you live and you learn, right? You do your job. Sometimes you realize that you've put your bias into the work, and you try not to do that. But at the very basic level, I think we all know in our head when we are being biased. I think the question is, at a very foundational level, it can be skill, like I said, knowing how to write and being specific about things. But I think the bias also is something which we refuse to confront in our head, and that's why the bias comes in. So it's also about the attitude.
We have a question from Rishabh.
Yeah.
Good morning, sir. Hope you're doing fine. I'm Rishabh from Viscom class.
Thank you.
So here's my question to you. What do you think about the progression from newspapers, FM radios, to people reading newspapers on phones, ebooks, and watching live on YouTube? Do you think that's, what is your opinion on that?
Well, I mean, any specific area about this transition you want me to? I mean, there are a lot of things about it, like there's the economics of it. Like, which is the one which would you be more interested in?
From a journalist standpoint.
Okay. Well, from a journalistic standpoint, I see journalism is journalism, irrespective of the medium, right? We are supposed to report facts, and we're supposed to verify facts and report them, right? So from a journalistic perspective, I think the core of journalism has changed very little in the digital medium. Definitely things are much faster, right? information spreads very, very, very quickly now compared to any time else in our history. So that has its advantages and disadvantages, because sometimes information is wrong, there's misinformation, disinformation, so those things spread quite a bit. So as journalists, what we are facing now definitely is that we have to deal with a lot more misinformation out there. See, generally gatekeeping is bad, but what happened in traditional media was that there were ethical gatekeepers, and you wouldn't see fake news so easily on a newspaper, right? It's known to happen even now, but you know that even when now, if it's on an actual hard copy newspaper, if you see fake news, there will be a digital angle, right? There will be a digital angle. It's being done somewhere in some WhatsApp, and that's all. So why? Because there were editorial processes in TV newsrooms, but TV newsrooms are not as good as print newsrooms. Print newsrooms had very, very good editorial process. Even if it's a small magazine somewhere in some corner of a city, they will have strong editorial processes, because it's not in a hurry, right? When you want to go, you report, you actually speak to people on the ground, you come back, you speak to the editor, you file your copy, the editor looks at the copy, and then they're like, no, this doesn't make sense, no, this is, I think, is wrong. They question the copy, and then it goes out. So that editorial process is something which is there in big newsrooms, even in digital. But as you can see, there are lots of the speed has something which has cost us a lot of lot of time and energy. So in that way, I think we're dealing with a lot of misinformation now, and that's a big problem. But I think good journalism, ground reported, verified, with good perspective, that I see has not changed much at all. Okay, so a good story in a good magazine, on print magazine, will be as good a story on one of the digital news websites today, and the process is followed there almost exactly the same, except the mode of publishing. And of course, we kind of have now, I think, more digital media. You are able to stream live from wherever you are with just your cell phone, and there are different interesting formats, web videos, 2 minutes, quick news, interesting news, all of those things are coming up. So we're also somewhat lines are blurring between fiction and non-fiction in certain aspects of digital news consumption, certain areas of digital news consumption, unfortunately. So yeah, I suppose there are lots of changes. What I think about it is it's good in many ways, obviously, but it's also comes with a lot of things which we need to figure out how to do better.
Very, very rightly put. In fact, in the whole battle between accuracy and time, I think it's something that constantly we're battling with as content creators. I have a question for you, Ram. I want to know, as a journalist, especially with the kind of reporting that you guys do, how do you deal with being in a potentially dangerous situation, be it political or in the COVID scenario itself?
Well, frankly, I have never been in very, very dangerous situations. I don't think so. Maybe here and there, once in a while, if there's some kind of a very volatile situation, maybe political rally or a few things like that, maybe a controversial story or some mining, something like that. Maybe it has happened here and there. But the thing is, see, every situation is very different. Like if you're in a volatile situation, it always helps to take help from cops or inform your office in advance so they can get you some help, and things like that. But COVID is a very different situation. I think one of the things that we've told in COVID first for all our reporters is that nobody's forcing you to go out there. I think that would be grossly irresponsible on our part to say that you have to go. And obviously we're not even asking people to come to office, and many organizations there are not doing that. They're cutting pay if you're not able to come to office and things like that. We've all heard stories like that, at least with the News Minute, where I think some go by some humanity. So so basics is that that you allow people to take the kind of precautions that they feel is necessary, and you enable them to do that. But if there are people who are willing to go out there and report, and see, a fair amount of reporting can now thankfully happen with phones. Okay, again, we have to credit technology for that, right? There's so many WhatsApp groups, there's so many people we can just call, and we can ask them to send videos, we can ask them to send photos. I mean, you can't just go by that. You need to have some verification skills and things like that. Sometimes photos and videos can also be misleading. But yeah, some of it is possible. It's not entirely impossible. So that is a good thing. But sometimes you have to go out, right? At that time, well, yeah, it's the same as anything else. We're frontline workers in that sense. So masks and PPE kits and, a double mask and gloves and not go to areas which are very, very high risk. So, so in the COVID situation, things are very different. But otherwise, I think, I think it all depends on the situation, the kind of protection you take for yourself.
Okay. We have a question from Tirza here. She's our final year student. Yes, Tirza.
Hello, Mr. Ramanathan. I would like to
Hi.
ask you a question. What is your image of future press that you would suggest us to work towards?
Okay. So very, I don't know if I'm capable of answering these questions, if I deserve to answer these questions. See, I think we're going through a big credibility crisis, right? So the one thing I wish we can all do for the future, we get back to the basics of journalism, which is that report the facts and go to the ground and report the facts, right? As simple as that. You've got to be you got to have boots on the ground. You've got to be the person on the ground going and meeting actually, and which is changing a lot these days. I'm not saying it's not being done at all. There are great journalists out there who are doing it, but unfortunately, with the digital medium and everything, a lot of things are happening on the phone. So I think we need to get back to the basics. We need to be reporters and journalists who go to the spot, speak to people, and start ground up, right? Rather than just calling people up and finding the information on the phone and things like that. So I think that's one thing which is very, very important that we need to start, inculcating. We need more bodies on the ground. That's one thing. Second thing, as I said, reporting the facts. So I think the question of bias and perspective, we need to be able to deal with that better. I think we are again now living very polarizing times. So we have to be mindful of the fact that our society is polarized, right? Our readers are not always right. So while we report facts and we are very careful about the kind of perspectives we are wrapping those facts in, and we have to be truthful to the fact that whether we may believe some kind of information will have some kind of desired effect or not, we have to still report the fact. I think we still have to be conscience keepers of society. I think we have to question people, we have to question ourselves, and we have to question the government, and we have to question people in our families, people amongst in our friend circles who are supporters of people who are doing something wrong, across party lines and across social divides. So I think it's important to be facts are sacrosanct, but it's important to have boots on the ground. But at the same time, I think a kind of morality and conscience is fast diminishing. And journalism especially is becoming a very toxic trade right now, especially TV journalism. I can't imagine being a TV journalist today. It's really stressing out to a lot of my friends who are working there, and they don't have an option of going somewhere else. And so I think that conscience we have to keep. When I look at some of the news anchors today, I wonder how are they able to do this? Right? How are they able to spread so much hate? Somewhere they lost their conscience on the way, right? And it could be because of various things, money or access and things like that. So that's something which I think we should keep in mind. And speaking of access, journalism give you a lot of access, right? I remember as a 20-year-old, I could walk into a chief minister's office in one of the southern states with the Times Now mic in my hand. That kind of power at that age can really get you ahead. So what's important at that time is to be grounded and know the responsibility of that kind of access and power, and do responsible things. And it comes from a certain morality and conscience. So yeah, those are my broad points. If I think more, maybe I can come up with better things as well. But extempore, this is what I can come up with.
It's nice to hear your candid opinion. We have a question from Yohit.
Hello,
Yohit?
sir.
Yeah, hi, Rohit. Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Go ahead.
Okay, sir. So my question is, what, according to you, is the main barrier of journalism freedom? Because today, whatever the journalists are trying, few journalists are not only. I'm not only talking about TV journalists. They, yeah, as I told, I'm not only talking about TV journalists. Even though the journalists who try to spread the exact news, there are something which stops them. So, what, according to you, is the main barrier of journalism freedom? That's my question, sir.
Well, there's several barriers, and I suppose what I would call the main barrier could have some bias on my part. But I do think right now, I think the political environment. I think that's the biggest challenge right now. The kind of political environment that we have in the country, the need for this establishment to continuously manage the narrative, quote unquote, manage the narrative. It's almost like it's not a cabinet, but it's not a cabinet of ministers. It's a bunch of public relation experts and advertising experts, right? So the fact that they are expending so much energy on controlling the narrative means a lot of money, time, energy, and effort is being spent on policing the media and policing journalists. And it happens from organized, concerted efforts at the very top level of this country to the grounds, where it could be an uncle or a brother in your house who has a Twitter ID and he goes and attacks people. Right? It happens across from top to bottom. And I think that political environment, which is constantly worried or constantly on game about what is the narrative which is being set, is the biggest challenge right now. Because you can just state a simple fact today, and your entire journalistic credibility could be questioned and destroyed because of the kind of political environment now. Right? That's because they can attribute agendas to you. I mean, they could do a lot of things. So, but that's certainly not the only reason why journalists sometimes don't do what they're doing, right? Like they have journalists like all of us. We all need to make money. We all have ambitions in life. We all want access, right? And there are genuinely people who think that we want a particular kind of country, right? A particular, maybe a Hindu supremacist or a Hindu nationalist. There are genuinely people who believe that that's the kind of country we want to be. And they could be professional journalists, although I suppose we can't call them that. But professionally, they could be journalists. And so they're just participating in the kind of political agenda that they believe in, right? So, but I think overall, it's the kind of toxic political atmosphere which we live in, the times that we live in. And yeah, I think an auxiliary to that is the social media. I think social media giants have done criminal things to the larger media ecosystem, right? If there is a top person, most irresponsible person in the world when it comes to misinformation, it's Mark Zuckerberg. Because the kind of power Facebook and WhatsApp have, and the fact that you refuse to do things which can reduce misinformation, they have destroyed democracy across the world, right? So social media also is a big challenge. And obviously, a lot of people would hate the idea that social media is happening, because suddenly they feel that people have been empowered and things like that, which is true, right? When I was a journalist 10 years ago, I really saw that social media was able to question dominant media narratives, because that time the media had been hijacked. And medias are always, mainstream media is always playing some agenda or the other. So yes, do we need a response from ground up through social media? We do. But now social media has been hijacked, right? So yeah, I think social media also is a huge problem. But ultimately, social media also is a tool. So I would think that it's the political atmosphere and the toxic political culture that we have right now, which is the biggest challenge we are facing.
Ram, I have a question for you. I want to know, we keep telling our students to go ahead and take up internships in organizations. How important do you think it is, especially for students who intend to become, who want to get into the field of journalism, and especially how how important is it for them to pick their beat at a very early stage?
Okay, so internships by themselves, I think there is nothing more important than them. I think I did like 4 or 5 internships during my 3-year undergrad, and I think that helped me more than the course itself. So internships are very, very important. I can't state emphatically more that internships are very important. But I see a lot of students doing the internship because they have to. That's not going to help. You've got to take real initiative, and newsrooms are people where newsrooms are places where initiative is rewarded, right? And so internships are very important. You do 1, 2 more. Don't take a break during your college holidays. Instead, go and intern somewhere. It can be fun, It doesn't have to be your, oh my god, I have to go to office kind of a thing. It can be fun, You learn a lot of things. Be confident. Learn from your mistakes. Sometimes you get shouted at. Sometimes you do a great job and you get accolades. So it can be a lot of fun. You need to go, and because that's where you meet real people. You need and no course can prepare you enough, right? You need to go meet real people. When you go start doing those stories and meeting people on the ground, hearing what they say, seeing things with your own eyes, is when you actually start learning things. So internships are very important. But at the same time, I think internships itself has become a small cottage industry. Okay, and especially small organizations like us, we struggle with interns because it becomes an added burden for us to like deal with them and things like that. So it is a challenge, but I think ultimately it comes down to the initiative of the person. Any intern, I mean, I haven't had interns for a while. I mean, dealt with interns for a while now. But till I used to deal with that, I used to tell them very simple things. You want work, you come and ask me. I'll give you work. You do that work, you'll learn something. Go. I'm not responsible for making sure. If you come, you want to coast for 1 month and you want a letter at the end of the month, happily. Just come, sit in the office, don't bother me. Right, so that's my funda with internships, and we've seen in the news minute some of our interns do great work and do some amazing work thereafter in other organizations or in our own organizations. Some of the best reporters we have had or have come through our internship programs, and they're very good. So internships are very, very important. Okay. The second question was, I'm sorry.
I was asking about picking a beat very early on in the career.
Yeah. So I see picking a beat. There are a couple of things. So, what kind of a beat is important? See, picking a beat is an advantage and a disadvantage. An advantage because you get to concentrate on something, right? So, for me, for instance, my first beat in television when I was working with NETV, it was the airport beat. Very whatever, it's not a big deal. But airport beat was interesting because I would get to know every VIP coming in and going out because of the kind of information that I'd set up, things like that. And you get to know interesting things about the airport, right? You get to know where cargo smuggling happens, or, you get to know how the customs operates. You get to know how DRI operates. So a lot of interesting things you learn, and that's how your journalistic knowledge is built. You focus on something, you know how the ATC operates. When there's a big air crash or something, then nobody knows the kind of things you do because of the ground. You don't need the kind of contacts that you have. So beats are great because it gives you something to anchor. It gives you an anchor, and then you learn so much about those things that that information becomes valuable. And sometimes it's something like crime, for instance, becomes a beat, and crime and all is a very coveted beat now. It can be a great career choice, right? Because crime, you can coast all along with the career, and you can even move to other things from crime, like national security, and you could even go to politics or something. So crime, things like that are great. But at the same time, what happens with beats is that you get locked in. And at some point in a career, if you've locked yourself in, then it's a major issue. So I think initially beats are important, but it can often lock you in, and then your career, if you are kind of person who's not interested after a point in that kind of work, then the beat is just a burden on you. You're just like, man, mine is a boring beat, I don't want to do this. And then obviously not always somebody else is going to give you a better beat. And there's a lot of competition. Like politics is a very coveted beat. You'll find vultures there who will not let you in at all, right? National security in Delhi is a big beat. Crime is a big beat in most cities, and it's difficult to break in. And all of these places in the big beats and all, there's a lot of beat politics and things like that. So yeah, there's good and there's bad.
Very interesting. We have a question from Laksh Shroff, one of our students. Laksh.
Go ahead, Laksh.
Good afternoon, sir. So my question to you is, what is your view or your perspective or the future for visual media?
Sorry, what is my view?
What is your perspective for the future of visual media?
Future of visual media.
He's asking basically more of probably, if I'm not wrong, he's probably asking for a holistic view of your view on the future of visual media. Let's probably stick to news as such, but yeah.
Of course. See, I don't know. The thing about visuals now is that there's a lot of crowdsourcing and there's a lot of user-generated content which is coming in, right? So I would think that storytelling should improve, and storytelling should be or could become or should possibly be one of the things which should start separating user-generated visual content with professionally created news content, journalistic content, right? So I think we should start paying more and more attention. I think we do. I'm just saying, I think that we need to continue doing that. Storytelling on the visual medium, our attention spans are going down. So how do you put... Well, I think things are becoming slightly better. I don't know. I do have friends in documentary filmmaking. Maybe they'll be able to answer this better. And I'm sorry if I'm wrong. I think OTT platforms are, to some extent, not a lot, to some extent willing to, I think, invest a little bit in documentaries and things like that. Although entertainment is a bigger, this thing. See, the thing about documentaries is that they take a lot of time and a lot of effort. Making a good documentary is extremely difficult. It's not an easy craft at all. It's got to be high on production value, especially if it's in a good platform. And at the same time, it takes time. Right? For instance, someone like Anand Patwardhan takes forever to make a documentary. Right? He may have visuals for years, going back a decade, and then he puts the documentary out. So a documentary is something which takes time, which takes effort. It takes a lot of energy and a lot of talent. And when you're doing something like that, I think the challenge then there is that the economics of it, right? It has to make sense. So a documentary typically on a free platform like YouTube or something will not make any sense at all, because you will not be making any money out of it. So I think investment in documentary filmmaking is something which is required. But at the same time, I think more and more opportunities are opening up because of OTT, is at least my understanding. That I have heard a few friends say a few interesting things. I mean, nowhere near fiction, nowhere near entertainment. That divide is huge. The gap is massive. But I think with the OTT platforms and everything, we are getting, people are willing to look at things a little bit more. Other than that, I think I don't see many major challenges. Money, if you give a good team good enough money and enough time, I think there are definitely teams out there which create great documentaries. And yeah, I think what I said about political environment, I mean, that follows all of us everywhere, including documentary filmmaking. But I think because of the small audience that documentary has, I think they haven't really cracked down on that yet. So, yeah.
Very rightly put. Rishabh, you have a question, right? Please go ahead.
Yes, sir. So nowadays, that the common man have access to social media and could tweet out anything at the blink of an eye, do you think it's necessary that the legal restrictions on social media should be laid?
See, it's a double-edged sword. The problem with right now we're seeing, right, you saw a political establishment rise to power on the back of unbridled social media, on the back of often on the back of abuse and vitriol and hate and bigotry, and social media giants allowed that, and we have seen we're all paying the price for it. But at the same time, now that that particular political establishment is in power, they're using the same regulation to crack down on on dissent, right? So, but so yeah, the context of the times that we live in are always going to be very important to the kind of regulation that we say that we think is going to be needed for media. But at a very foundation level, I do think some amount of regulation is important. I think, but the regulation to a large extent needs to be self-regulation, not government regulation, because I definitely think that too much power with the government is always bad. So government regulation, even if it's a good, quote unquote, good government in power, they will always be more interested in their own power than public good. That's the kind of, unfortunately, we have to make peace with that. But yeah, regulation is important. Self-regulation, I think, is extremely important. And the biggest regulation to media is, the collective morality of the society, and that's why we are failing today. The reason why we're failing today is the collective morality of the society. And society, I say, in the upper echelons, the upper caste, upper class society, is the collective morality is so rotten, and that's the best marker. That's the best regulation that we can have for media, and it's because that we are failing there is that we don't have kind of regulation on social media. So government regulation, I think, should be as little as possible, because when a crime happens online, you still need somebody to be the police, right? So to that extent, I think it's important. And see, when it comes to regulation, I think we always, one thing I want to mention here though is, see, Facebook and Twitter and all that, they can do a lot more on their own. I think what we should have a problem with is the government forcing them to do, but we as people should be forcing them to do certain things, right? For instance, I have a huge problem with anonymity online. My mind is changing quite a bit. My opinions are changing quite a bit on the importance of anonymity online, because we've all seen the importance of anonymity online. It's that whistleblowers can come, new information which otherwise would not be access to all of us has come out because of anonymity. I think people can have some kind of protection and speak their mind. But I think the benefits of anonymity online are maybe beginning to outweigh the disadvantages of anonymity online are maybe beginning to outweigh the benefits of it. Now we see a huge amount of anonymous trolls or bots out there who are creating havoc in our democracy, right? We saw what happened with the Trump election in the US. So yeah, with those kind of things, I think regulation by the social media giants, by media organizations, self-regulation is extremely important. Reducing hate online. Like, we started cracking down on hate comments on our Facebook wall a lot more now. We are banning people right, left, and center. That if you come here and point to a Muslim or point to a Christian and say something wrong about them, you are out. We don't want those kind of readers. We don't want that kind of an audience, which is hateful. And we, as an organization, have that much power in the pages that we control, right? So that kind of regulation is important. So that's no government regulation, right? That's me setting the tone of what the rules of engagement are in my area, in my space. And my Facebook page is my space. My YouTube comments are my space. My closed forum is my space. My comment section on my website is my space. And I am going to regulate and regulate hard. So we need to make a difference between those two, government regulation and what we can regulate as individuals or as entities in the spaces that we control. So government regulation should be kept minimal, but I think, yes, we do need to regulate as individuals a lot more. because it's because of unregulated hate that we're here where we are right now.
Ram, during this pandemic time, I've seen not just the pandemic, since 2019 itself, a lot of online platforms, online news platforms have moved on to paid subscription models. This has in fact had a very positive effect in one way. At the same time, it's probably also not reaching the right information to people at certain times. What is your take on this, and how important is this in your opinion?
See, subscriptions are important. We have taken the membership route. So we have kept our information free. We have kept our journalism free, and it's accessible to everyone. But we still are asking, pleading, begging sometimes for people to pay for our journalism. So we do think that that's more appropriate for us. But at the same time, the challenge is that, see, when you don't pay for something, the value of that diminishes. See, when I do some, when I'm working these days, when somebody comes and asks me for a little bit of help with, say, something to do with communication work, can you do a small project on the side or something? If at all I can take something like that, the first thing I tell them is that you'll have to pay me for it. Why? Because if I do that work for free, you don't value that work, right? And that's a waste of my time. I'm sorry. So it's the same. When you stop paying, when you don't pay for journalism, then you don't value that. You take it for granted. And then the value of that goes away because journalists are not then getting paid enough, right? Then they don't do a good job either. So paying for journalism is very important. But you're right. I think there is a challenge when it comes to free flow of information. That means what? That means only people who pay can get good information, which again will only deepen the social divides in the country and things like that, right? So we need a model of a bit of both. But I think media organizations out there have kind of been able to do that, right? By keeping the cost low, for instance, you can do that. Newspapers are still dirt cheap in India. They're not very expensive at all. So you can buy information out there. And television also is not very expensive. And so I think subscriptions and things are important, but the important thing is to keep the cost low so that it is accessible to people. And yeah, that's kind of how I kind of look at it. Yeah.
We have a question from Nitisha. Nitisha, please go ahead.
Sir, as a person in the media field for a longer time, what is your one piece of advice that you would have for the newcomers into the field that they avoid doing? Something
Sorry?
that they avoid.
I'm
What
sorry, I
is
didn't understand.
What are the
She's
I can't
common
hear you.
She's asking, what is the advice that you would give someone, any future budding journalists, especially students who are passing out from J schools, who are entering into the mainstream media? What is the advice that you would give them?
I kind of think we've covered it, but again, stick to facts, go to the ground, have some sense of right and wrong, right? Have some sense of right and wrong. And I think understanding the society is very important. Looking at your own privileges is very important. Looking at your own entitlements is very important. Having an open mind is very, 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 very important. And these are all things we've all learned the hard way. I mean, I was probably very bad when I started out my career on all these accounts. And we've learned these things, and I'm still learning a lot of things. So, and even more so, I think today, a particular idea of social justice is increasingly becoming more important in India today. If you don't have that perspective, if you don't understand how our society is divided, who are the oppressors in our society, who are the oppressed in our society, how social discrimination, gender-based discrimination, sexuality-based discrimination, caste-based discrimination, I think understand these things are extremely important because that's why we're losing out, right? We all are smart. We're all sensible people. We all have great tools. We can be great speakers, great content creators. The talent and everything is just evolving all the time. and I'm pretty sure most of you, we work hard enough, we can be the best in what we do. But where we are failing is these things. So yeah, I'll just hope that you're able to be better individuals, like all of us, like I strive to be.
Yeah, sometimes I think when we come from a place of privilege, right, we don't realize what is it the rest of the world is going through. What is normal for us is not everyone has that privilege, right? So I think one thing which we keep asking our students is read about the other things. It's not just necessary or enough to only know about the technical aspect, right? So I think
absolutely.
sometimes this
No, thanks for mentioning that. I think, I haven't read enough books in a while. I've had a few busy years and I'm very ashamed of that. But definitely reading, I'm very thankful, Ananda, for bringing it up. I think it's very important. There were about 5 years in between when I read a lot, voraciously in my earlier career. Just during college and a little after that. I think that can set the tone for a lot of things. And being a voracious reader definitely helps you a lot. Because when you read more and more, and I think, there's great content out there, even on Netflix or Amazon or something, knowing more and more about the world out there, getting different perspectives. And that happens when you consume more and more media and credible, good stuff, like good books and stuff like that, can really help. And I agree with you entirely on reading. That's probably the most important.
I thank you so much, Ram. I'm so sorry today we were supposed to do a half an hour session, but we've almost taken an entire hour of your time. But I think some of the points that you have brought out are so important, especially when they hear it from someone who is not so much older than them, someone who has been on both sides of broadcast and print, and someone who works with something like the News Minute, who I feel have been bringing out a lot of relevant and important information in today's context. I think it really throws a lot of insight and sort of inspires the next generation. So my heartfelt thank you to you.
Thank you for having me over. All the best to everybody who was watching this, to future journalists. Yes, I wish you the best. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ram.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. So everybody, please do stay tuned. We have a set of academic lectures, competitions, debate, quiz, everything coming up for you today. Please do stay tuned and we'll come back to you with more interesting and exciting content. Thank you so much. Have a lovely day. Now the feedback form will be added into the chat box, and the feedback code will be displayed on the screen right now. Please ensure that you use the right feedback code when you fill up the feedback form. Forms without the correct code will not be issued certificates. Now, very soon, we're going to begin at 11 our virtual debate competition for the class Viscom students. Please do tune in and support our students and watch them have a battle of words on the screen. A special thank you to the management, to all the faculty members, and to all the students for supporting us for this lovely event and helping us curate it and take it to the next level. Also, a special thanks to our partners, Millen, and we are also the institutional members of IIMCR. A hearty thank you to all of them. Have a lovely day. Stay tuned. See you at the debate.